So I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to our speaker today. So we are very excited to have Rachel Kinder with us. She is the Frameworks Program Director at Mission, West Virginia. She's got 16 years of experience in foster care, adoption, and kinship care. She began her career at DHHR and in CPS and home finding. She has a bachelor's in social work from Shepherd University and a master's in social work from Ohio University. And at Mission, West Virginia, her goals are to communicate the dire need for foster parents, especially those willing to work towards reunification and birth family engagement. Concurrently, she works to highlight successful adoption stories, especially those involving older youth and teens, and believes that the shortage of foster parents should be viewed as a social issue and addressed as a community need. And I could not agree more, especially in this state. So thank you, Rachel, for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to her to start her presentation.
Thank you for having me. This is the first time I have done one of these as a presenter and not an attendee. So I am excited to be here, and you covered my introduction, so that's great. Today I'm going to talk about supports for foster and kinship families. And just a couple of caveats. There's a million resources out there that I could not cover in an hour, so I tried to focus on the ones that benefit the family as a whole or the parents versus resources for children in foster care, because that would be a whole nother presentation. And I do tend to tinker with my presentations up until they start. So if there's any typos, please be patient with me. I was editing until about an hour ago. And I put a lot of links in this presentation. Obviously, they're not going to do you any good during the presentation, but this will be emailed to you. And I know you can all Google things, but I thought it's also handy just to have the links right there. So I usually put a shameless picture of my kids there, but I need to update that. But basically, I've been here at Mission, West Virginia for 16 years. And prior to that was at DHHR. I was a 4E student, so did CPS and then home finding. That was in the Martinsburg area. But now I am at Mission and our office is in Hurricane. And I'm a foster adoptive mom, and I always include that because it's pretty relevant to my presentation in different points and also just relevant to my work. So for those not familiar with Mission, West Virginia, we're a nonprofit. We're in Putnam County, but we provide a lot of our services statewide. We were established in 1997. So last fall, we celebrated our 25th anniversary. We were pretty proud of that as a nonprofit. It's not always easy to keep your doors open and your programming going. We have two main programs. THINK stands for Teaching Health Instead of Nagging Kids, and they provide healthy relationship and teen pregnancy prevention education in, I want to say, about 24 county school systems right now. They work with high schools, middle schools, juvenile detention centers, and residential centers. So they do absolutely work with that foster care population, as well as my program does, and that's Frameworks. Frameworks is pretty much everything and anything related to foster care, adoption, kinship care. So I'm going to talk about the resources for families who are caring for kids in state custody is my primary goal today. And I'm going to start with foster families, which are also called resource families. And this just pertains to any family that is certified to care for a variety of children. So these are families not caring for specific children, but families whose homes are open to care for children as needed, children who are in state custody. There has been kind of a movement to call them resource families to differentiate them from other families. It hasn't really caught on, so I'm primarily going to use the term foster family. So back in 2015, DHHR essentially privatized so that families who are, sorry, I've got things displaying that are blocking my presentation. Anyway, families that want to be certified as a foster family need to go through one of the 11 private agencies in West Virginia, and those are listed there. Golden Girls, is my understanding, has a certification to do home studies for the families that are interested in children in their care. So I did not list them. These 11 agencies are the ones that are contracted to do home studies for someone interested in just being foster families. And way at the bottom, there's a link that is not an open link on our webpage, but I shared it with you guys. It is a list of all 55 counties and the specific agencies that serve them and the specific contacts at those agencies. So resources for foster families. They receive a monthly subsidy, referred to as a subsidy or a boarding care check. And a couple of years ago, I think 2019, that amount raised from $600 a month for any child to a tiered system. And so the minimum is now $790, and then it increases for the age of the children, with the idea that basically teens are more expensive to have in your household. And also there are more supports for infants, things like WIC that are kind of in addition to the boarding care check. So they wanted to make sure that people had additional funds to care for teenagers. So the supports in the system for foster families are that boarding care check, a medical card. For the first time a child comes into placement, they are eligible for that $300 clothing voucher. And then the families are really at the mercy of their agency for what supports that they receive. And it differs between every agency, but some things that a foster family might receive through their agency. Some agencies have therapists on staff. They receive their initial training through their agency as well as ongoing trainings. All agencies have a 24/7 crisis response on-call worker type service for families. For children who need visitation, who have visitation with their birth families, the agency either arranges for transportation or an ASO provider helps with transportation. That's not saying foster families don't do some of that, because I did that when I was fostering, but that is a service that's pretty widely used. Some agencies have support groups. Some agencies like to have a lot of events, Christmas parties, different occasions where foster families can get together. And a lot of the agencies these days have foster closets where families that need, especially like temporary things, a car seat, a crib for a short-term placement of a baby, just kind of arranges for a way for families to share supplies that they need for fostering. And then next, this is for kinship, relative, and fictive kin, and another I'm going to kind of use these terms interchangeably. I'm using these terms to refer to families who care for kids that they had an established relationship with prior to the child coming into care. So these families are certified through DHHR, and they are certified for specific children. A lot of times it's grandparents. We see tons of great grandparents caring for kids. Kinship relationships refers to relationships that are a little less, have a direct blood relationship. So it could be, you know, someone who was previously married into the family, or someone who is a distant relative. And then fictive kin can be used to refer to someone who just has an established relationship with the child, but is not a relative. Excuse me. So we've actually seen a lot of teachers with kids these days. It could be former neighbors, could be someone from the church, just someone with a relationship with a child that is not legally defined. But the good news, something I think DHHR does really well, is that the majority of our children who are in foster care are placed with relative and kinship families. It's always over 50%. And I love that DHHR is open to more fictive kin relationships, because there's a lot of families out there that are great resources for kids. And I'm glad we don't let the lack of a legally defined relationship hold us back from placing with these families. So for kinship and relative and families, they receive a TANF child only check. And that is limited to someone with a blood or legal relationship. I kind of defined out the majority of people who qualify: grandparents, sister, brother, great grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. And then for the families that do not qualify for the TANF child only, because they don't have that legally defined relationship, they receive a demand payment issued by DHHR in that same amount equal to the TANF child only. And I have the rates here. That actually went up a few years ago too, which is great, because it used to be in the 200s, which does not go far. So these are the current rates. And that is what you see for TANF, or the equal amount in the demand payment. This is what relatives have to apply for with DHHR, even if the child is physically in their custody, or in the custody of DHHR. DHHR has placed the child. The relatives still need to go through the TANF approval process to receive this funding. And it's better now that the rates have raised. It still does not match the boarding care check. So a lot of our goals with Kinship and Relative is to get them certified as quickly as possible so that they can get that higher boarding care rate. Additional supports for our kinship caregivers and families, they receive the medical card as well. This is new, I want to say within the last 2 years, is there's a $300 placement incentive payment, and that is to be issued within the first 2 weeks of placement or immediately after the first hearing. And that is to cover immediate expenses for the household for having these kids placed. And there's a memo out there that says like what you can use that on. It's basically things required immediately to care for the child or things to prepare your home for a home study. And with that policy change also came a $200 home study payment, and that is for families that take care of everything necessary for their home study to be completed within a certain time period. So that its intention is to motivate the families to do your training, turn in your paperwork, do everything necessary so that your home can be certified. And there are, it doesn't hold it against the family if there's a systemic issue that prevents their home from being certified. As long as the family did what they needed to do within the time frame, they should be able to receive that payment upon certification. Again, the kinship relative families are eligible for that initial clothing voucher. If this is the child's first placement, that's $300. And I'll get into some of the barriers around that in my barriers section, but that's what policy is. And then they're also eligible for some additional funding through West Virginia Works for caretaker and child-only households. And this is not a great flyer, but this is what I was given. So it's been copied and scanned a few times. But for families receiving those child-only checks, they are eligible for these additional pieces of assistance if they meet certain qualifications and have certain needs. And I'm going to talk about my Kinship Navigator program, but that's a program that really does look into this funding for families that a lot of workers don't know about or don't promote, but we want to help the families access this. I don't know how widely known this is, but it should really be utilized for all of our families that are caring for kids in DHHR custody. So Mission West Virginia's Kinship Navigator program has been a really good addition to the supports available for these relative kinship families. This is federal funding that West Virginia is able to access, and we started our program at the end of 2019. And we have 4 full-time navigators, 1 part-time. In 2022, we were able to serve, that's calendar year, we were able to serve 724 families. And basically, it's basically phone assistance, but a navigator should receive a referral when a child is placed in a relative kinship's non-certified home and the child is in custody of DHHR. My workers do assessments. They explain the system. And what I always say is the best CPS worker in the world can go over everything, but there's no way in the world this caretaker is going to remember that the next day, especially in the middle of a crisis placement. So my navigators are there to say like, hey, do you understand your role? Do you understand what you need to do to protect the kids? Here's what you're responsible for. You know, you may or may not let your biological son or daughter see the kids. That's always an issue. Here's what the court system looks like. Here is what an MDT is. You need to, you know, we have families that didn't know they could get a medical card for the kids, weren't given a medical card, and pay out of pocket for medical expenses for months. So that's why we really urge getting these referrals very timely. We help them understand what financial resources they are eligible for and what steps they need to take to get those resources. My staff are employed by Mission West Virginia and not DHHR, but they are in the now PATH system, formerly FACS, and they do have DHHR emails, which gives them access to the DHHR IM chat. So sometimes they have greater ability to reach workers than grandma does trying to catch the worker on the phone. They're real good about like, hey, I can just chat this DHHR worker, ask them what's the date of this or what's the status of this, and get that information back. We spend a lot of time hunting down community resources and services for families. And the great thing about the Navigator program is that we can take a couple of days and track down a hard to find resource for a family. You know, if we have to make 30 phone calls to find this specific thing, we can do it. Where CPS workers just do not have the time to do that. So, and we're not just an information and referral. So we're not like, hey, here's a number for this, here's a number for that. We will call the resource and say, hey, this grandma needs diapers and a car seat. Do you have that? Great. Can you put grandma's name on it? I will have grandma come pick it up tomorrow, and then call grandma and say, hey, I've located this for you. It's waiting for you. So we really try to make that a warm handoff versus just, hey, here's a number. They may or may not be able to help you. One of the things that we did not anticipate when we designed this program was how much emotional support we provide to caregivers over the phone. Sometimes they just need someone to listen. They need someone to validate their concerns. Sometimes they just need to vent. But that's a pretty time-intensive piece of our program. And then another piece we didn't anticipate was how many tangible resources we have funded or tracked down that these families need. I have been a CPS worker. I have placed kids in homes where I know they're going to sleep on the sofa for a couple nights, and I support that in general. Definitely leave them with grandma, let them sleep on the sofa. Beats putting them in a stranger's foster home. But there's got to be the resource that comes after. There's got to be getting grandma a bed for her house. So what we ended up doing was amending our grant budget so that we can make purchases. And people are definitely aware of that. We get a lot of calls, and we're really good at, we can ship a bunk bed from Amazon for pretty cheap, and we can ship mattresses, twin beds, fire extinguishers, smoke detectors, all of that. We spend a whole lot of time getting resources for those families.
Rachel, if you have a minute, there's just there's a couple questions in the chat, and one was about the program you were just talking about. So somebody asked, how are navigators different from department HFs? I'm not sure what that stands for. Just another resource.
Different than department workers, I'm guessing.
It says HFs. So I don't know.
Oh, home finders. Home finders.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a couple different ways. One, we are able to call and ask for donations of things, which is my understanding. DHHR workers can't really ask for community donations as much. We're not certifying the family. Our idea is to be a support to CPS and to home finding and do the extra tasks that they are just much too time intensive. We're not visiting the home. We're not validating the safety of the home, but we do have funding that we can purchase items needed to pass that home study. We can act as kind of a liaison for the family, like get questions answered where they just, not that CPS or home finding wouldn't answer the question, but just, you know, that they have communication delays. And something that has kind of helped is that we're independent of DHHR, so we have no authority in these cases. And we have noticed that families have kind of seen us as a support where they can say, hey, I have this need, but I'm embarrassed to relay it because I'm afraid you might remove the kids if I disclose this need. Obviously, if it's a safety issue, we would report it back to DHHR, but a lot of times it's just like, oh, you need this, we can take care of that, and move on.
Thank you. And the other question was, which I think somebody did kind of answer in the chat, but just clarification around kinship placements receiving TANF and or demand payments and not the subsidy and or the order of those. So hopefully
right. So if I lost custody of my children today, they're placed with my mom, she would go to DHHR and apply for a TANF child only check. And while she has my kids, she would be working to be certified as a certified foster parent for my specific children. But until certification, she would receive, since she's their grandma, she would receive that child only TANF check. And then once she became certified, that would be canceled, that would be stopped, and she would receive the boarding care from then on out. So it's pre-certification when TANF and demand payments are relevant. And, you know, one of the big takeaways from the Kinship Relative program is just that it's small pieces of money. It's very small amounts. You know, I think my current grant budget is somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 for items for the families. So we have to be very strategic with it. So we look for, is this something DHHR is eligible to pay for? Is there a community resource for this? And then if those are both no's, then we purchase things. So we're very frugal with our budget, but $300 can make a huge difference when you've got a kid sleeping on a couch and we're able to buy a bed frame and a mattress. And something that I always do is try to get brand new bedding. And we always ask the caretaker, like, what is the kid like? Is it Paw Patrol? Is it butterflies, Pokemon, whatever? Our Amazon account looks absolutely crazy. But I think that demonstrates so much to the child that, what kid doesn't want new bedding? It demonstrates security in that new home. But also, like, this is something that makes them feel they are seen as an individual. It's not just a random donation that they had to make the best with. This is something that they specifically asked for and received. So just these small amounts of spending really go far. And a lot of it just relieving these small burdens on caretakers. We had a grandma a couple of years ago that had older kids and they kept wetting the bed, and they were maybe like 7 and 8. And she was embarrassed to tell the CPS worker they were wetting the bed. But I had small children at the time, and I understand completely what it means when your kid wets the bed and you have to do laundry in the middle of the night and you don't necessarily have extra bedding. And you can't, this was during COVID when it was really hard to find diapers and pull-ups. So this one Amazon shipment of pull-ups and waterproof mattress pads and extra sheets, like, I think that went so far to relieve grandma's stress. And she wasn't even comfortable telling DHHR that this was an issue. So these small things that it's hard to make them look meaningful in a grant report, but I think they mean a lot to these families. And we are set up to get referrals from DHHR as soon as the kids are placed, but we can also take referrals from anyone, self-referrals from the family, CASA, Ombudsman Office, Aetna, all these people send us referrals. This is where referrals go if you have one. Ideally, it's right after the kids are placed, but we can make exceptions to work with families if they're non-certified and caring for kids in custody. And then this section is kind of supports for all families, whether you're foster or kinship. So Aetna is the MCO, Mountain Health Promise, maintaining what was formerly medical cards for kids in care, including that link. They offer a lot in terms of small benefits for the kids, like incentives for going to doctor's appointments, and also different case management services, just depending on the needs of the family. All kids in foster care who are 5 or under are eligible for WIC, not dependent against the caregiver's income. That's for foster or relative families. Families where the caretakers work full-time or are in school are eligible for childcare. And there's this great map that shows who is the provider for each region. The thing I always note to new foster parents or new caregivers is if the kids are in foster care, it's not income dependent, but you still have to submit all of the income statements, your paychecks, your child support, your whatever. It's just part of the process. It's part of what they collect. But families who have need for childcare because of work or school are eligible for this. And there is even some funding. I'm not sure if it's in place still, where grandparents could get childcare covered in more of respite type situations. Maybe, grandma was older and wasn't in the workforce anymore, but she could get childcare just as a kind of relief, because we have grandmas in their 70s caring for babies and toddlers and multiple small kids in their home. And it's great that there is a resource where they can just kind of get a break. Foster closets, we work really hard to maintain an up-to-date list of foster closets. Some are run by agencies, some are run by churches, some are run by just caring individuals. There's quite a few. If you know of one that's not on our list, let us know and we'll add it. But these are great resources from everything from kids' clothes to car seats to bicycles, high chairs. Like, they really have a lot of things and can make them available quickly to families. School clothing vouchers, kids, I'm going to mangle the age requirement, at least school age children. I can't remember if they put pre-K in that recently or not, get that $200 a year school clothing voucher. And then all families receive some type of training with their certification. Pride is the kind of old school training that everyone was doing for a very long time. And that's still what DHHR trains their relative and kinship families with. Some of the foster agencies have moved on to Pride Next Generation, which is just the updated version of Pride, and it's half virtual, half in person. Presley Ridge has always, since they started working with more special needs kids, have modified their training to be specific for their families. And then several agencies have started this NTDC, National Training and Development Curriculum. I've heard great things about it, that it's much more modernized and that it was kind of a group effort among a lot of different child welfare agencies to develop it. And it's my understanding it's also free for the agencies to get trained and to be able to offer. So I think that's really promising. Relatives can sometimes get waivers for attending Pride. It's kind of cyclical. For a while, just about anybody could get a waiver for any reason, and then they tightened it up and nobody could get waivers, and I'm not sure where it's at now. If there's a reason a relative cannot attend Pride, their home finder can help them apply for a waiver. But these days it's mostly virtual, which has made it available for a lot of families to do more easily. Some system specific resources, and then in the second half I'll get into community resources. Is we have the Help for West Virginia mobile crisis response, and the website and phone number are there, and that is a contracted service, so different providers serve different areas. Like Prestera serves the area I'm in, which is like Lincoln and Cabell and some other counties. But families can call that when they're in crisis with a child, and they can be offered help over the phone or FaceTime, or there's a mobile response team that will actually come to their home if needed. And we also have Safe at Home and the CSED waiver, which I'm sure you've all heard lots about, so I'm not going to cover that extensively. But CSED, they're both similarly wraparound services. They vary a lot by the needs of the family, who's administering the contract in a certain area, all of that. CSED is for children ages 3 to 20, and it's available more longer term. Safe at Home, I believe they've changed the age requirements to make it 9 to 18, but that is limited to, I'm seeing nods, good, okay. I think it was 12 to 18 initially. That is eligible for 1 year. And you can get much better information than I can give you at those 2 links. Positive behavior support is a training curriculum to help parents address behavioral issues with kids. DHHR is really relying on this a lot, and there are different resources available on their website. And then this is one I kind of added on my own. This is parent-child interaction therapy, which you'll hear PCIT a lot. This is a training I went through for one of my children. I went through it with Valley Health. Just a quick search made me see that West Virginia University and Marshall Health both offer this, and I'm seeing it in more places in the state. It's pretty cool. You play with your kid in a room, and you are wired up with an earpiece, and a therapist watches you and advises you on certain things to do. It really helped me personally recognize a lot of mistakes I was making and ways I was kind of letting my kid control me. I believe it's ages 2 to 6. Due to the COVID interruption, we kind of squeezed my kid through as they were kind of approaching that age out limit, but it was really, really helpful to me to kind of assess, my parenting and address specific issues with my kid. It's really time intensive, but I just try to, any foster adoptive parent I know, I try to push that because I don't know how widely it's being used. Okay, barriers. Barriers to resources. This is a huge one, is policy versus practice. There's a lot of things in policy that if they worked the way they were in policy, they'd be fantastic and we'd all be good. But there's a lot of factors. DHHR has huge worker turnover. So, training can't cover everything. There's so much you learn through experience. A brand new economic service worker doesn't necessarily get it right on the child-only payments, the application. A lot of workers aren't familiar with that new incentive payment because it's new. So we, especially in the Navigator program, we do a lot of like, oh, hey, did you know about this policy? Can I send it to you? I think you could help us with this, and here's the policy. There's a lot of regional differences across DHHR. I was a home finder in Region 3, worked pretty different than it did in other regions. And then there's a lot of outside factors. We all And while any of us that work in the foster care field remembers when Walmart quit taking the vouchers. Every kid new to placement was getting a $300 Walmart voucher, and then Walmart quit taking them. And you know what is rough is that there's really no replacement for Walmart in West Virginia. It is broadly available throughout the entire state. Target isn't. I don't even know what other store you would go to that you could reliably find in other state. So even when we have DHHR workers who say, yes, I want to issue you a voucher for clothes, or I want to help, yes, we can help you buy a bunk bed, but they have to be a vendor. So it really got complicated. And then we all know there were some issues with the PATH system, which launched in January. They seem to be resolving. I know my subsidy check has been fine, and they seem to be working out the kinks. I don't know how you'd launch a new system without some troubles coming up, but we did have some issues where families were not getting their demand payments because of some system changeover issues. So there's just a lot of factors. And, one of the stories I always tell is like, okay, so you place baby with grandma. On paper, she has all these resources. She needs formula. Great. She qualifies for a WIC. Well, she did not have the correct paperwork to switch the WIC over from birth mom to her name. She did have food stamps, but Walmart would not sell her formula using her food stamps because that particular Walmart had formula categorized as a baby item. The baby was on a very specific formula that was really expensive. So, the system has a process to help grandma, but in practice, it wasn't working, and it wasn't working timely. And that's where our navigator program steps in a lot. And I know that other community resources step in a lot. Those several weeks after placement, before you get a TANF check, we help families with food. It's pretty dire sometimes, and they're fine. Once they start getting those resources that they're eligible for, they're fine. But sometimes we need to help them in that transition phase. Awareness and access. This is all, you're all in West Virginia, I assume. So transportation is a huge issue. Scarcity of resources is a huge issue. I'm going to get into that a little more in the next slide. And communication with families continues to be a barrier to resources and just working with families in the system. So we're West Virginia. We lack a lot of things. We lack a lot of resources for these families. But we also lack resources specific to our population. We don't have enough, and I'm not saying we don't have people out there providing great services, but we never have enough foster and adoption competent therapists and services. We don't have enough for babies who experience neonatal abstinence syndrome. One of my coworkers, there's so much focus on trauma. One of my coworkers who works with teens who are in need of families, she keeps saying, trauma is great, focus on trauma is great. We're not spending enough time helping these kids with grief. Kids who have lost parents to termination or to death, lots and lots of kids who have lost parents to death from substance use issues. She really feels like we are lacking in helping kids with grief. And then navigating biological family relationships. That's something I've experienced personally. We have a relationship with my son's birth mom, but boy, nobody taught me how to do it. And it's really unknown territory. And I think the system itself is getting more supportive of that. I think foster agencies are encouraging it more. But boy, we could use some resources on helping people navigate this. What families ask for, I thought was worth a slide, and what I hear just in my field, they want communication. Some of that is they want communication on broader DHHR issues, like, hey, there's a new PATH system, or hey, there's this new resource, but mostly they just want to hear back from their worker and they want to get questions answered. Peer support always comes up, and it's huge. I know when I was a brand new foster parent, I called my friend Carissa nonstop with the stupid things that you don't want to bother a worker with, but man, she was helpful. And we have to reframe how we think of peer support, because there's a lot of people out there that go, support groups, and then you host them and nobody shows up because there are a million barriers, from gas money to childcare to schedules. It's one of those things that it would be great for you to go. Are you going to make the effort to show up? Questionable. Are you able to show up? Questionable. So I'm seeing some great things with online peer support. And I think there's some some plans in the state for some kind of peer mentoring relationships that would not just be, hey, you need to show up at this church once a month in person, which just not everybody can do. Emotional support I talked about kind of goes along with the peer support, but these families, they need so much emotional support for what they're going through, and it's so easy to feel alone, and you have issues that only other foster parents or someone who works in the system are going to understand. Families ask for help navigating the school system, especially for kids with special education needs. And then respite. Respite is a big one. There's never enough respite. Okay, take a breath. And for this last third of my presentation, I'm going to talk about community resources that aren't necessarily tied to DHHR or to a foster agency, but can be really helpful. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Crime Victims Compensation Fund. That's been around for a long time, but what has changed is that children with an abuse and neglect petition are now eligible to apply as victims, essentially. And someone approached me from the fund, and I really couldn't kind of grasp how it worked. So I said, well, hey, my child's adopted. Can you help me apply? I'll do the process personally, and then I will have a better understanding. So I did apply for my child, and they have qualified. And basically what they have qualified for is funds up to $35,000 in reimbursement and up to age 26. So if my child is 22 and needs therapy related to, you know, what they experienced as a child, and they maybe don't have health insurance at that point, this can help them pay for it. So I just qualified my child without really having any immediate expenses to submit, but I know that it can reimburse for mileage to therapy appointments, doctor's appointments, things like we've got a lot of kids with sensory issues. So if you have that child that needs that weighted vest or, you know, one of those special seats to sit on in school or things like that, and no one else will cover it, you can apply for reimbursement. Basically anything that can be tied back to the abuse and neglect. They're a little short-staffed, I understand. Last I heard, they only had one investigator who's the one who has to qualify the child. But it's something I would encourage any family to go ahead and start, and you can qualify the child. And then later when expenses come up, they're already qualified. We have a foster care ombudsman that's new in the last couple of years. I included the link there. They respond to issues families have with the system, and they also have been issuing quarterly, I believe, reports talking about service gaps that they're identifying in the system. And Pam Kaler, the ombudsman, is a very, very thorough person, and those reports just pack in the information, and they've been super interesting to me. And I actually did have to file my first I don't know if you call it a complaint. I filed with the ombudsman's office for an issue that I had, and I was really impressed on a personal level, the responsiveness I got. This is pretty neat, this new church outreach. When I started at Mission West Virginia, almost 17 years ago, my job was to do church recruitment, and I did presentations at churches just nonstop, and it was not very effective, and it was not very trackable for a report, because you can go into a church and you're either going to depress everybody because you say, we have 6,000 plus kids in foster care and you need to be foster parents, and then you leave and you never know if they followed up. But what Chestnut Mountain Village is doing with their program that they're calling Foster West Virginia is really interesting. Greg Clutter is leading that. And they're basically equipping churches to support foster and kinship families. It's not recruitment. I think there's going to be some recruitment that comes as a side effect of this, but it is putting teams together within the church and identifying families in need, and then saying, okay, you're going to bring a meal to this family once a week. This person is going to show up at the house and tutor the kids in their homework a couple times a week. We're going to have this event, and caregivers can get have dinner and get some respite. They also have some this is very evidence-based. Greg has really researched what he's doing. They're also supporting DHHR and child welfare workers. They sent donuts to my office last month. I have an amazing office. I never not feel supported. I am never sad to come to work. I don't really need employee incentives, but it really made me smile that, you know, Foster West Virginia felt that we needed some donuts, like just little things. And And I think that what's going to happen is that families who are part of this care team who are supporting these families are going to say, oh, I could be a foster parent because look at the support my church is giving. And also, look, I met these kids and they're so cool and I could help kids like that. So I think recruitment will be a side effect, but Greg's mission is really for these families to be really supported. And I can't think of a foster family that I know that wouldn't benefit from a care team helping them. Last I heard, they had at least 10 to 12 churches that were signing on, and they all kind of run the programs individually for their church. So there's a lot of room to adapt it to their individual congregation. But really, I've been in church recruitment forever, and this is the most effective thing I've ever seen done. So I'm really optimistic about it. So on that note, there is a summit here in Hurricane on May 3rd that you can still register for. So for people who want to carry this back to their church or people who just work in the field, I think it's going to be really interesting. I participated in one he did in Morgantown last fall, maybe, and it was really good. And these are some of the speakers. So he's got national leaders coming in. So it's just really interesting work. So if you're interested, you can still register. Support groups. The West Virginia Foster Adoptive and Kinship Parents Network has a Facebook page with a lot. It's a very active Facebook page. The leader also does a lot of advocacy and lobbying, and they do host an annual training. It's been virtual as far as I've known, but that's because of the COVID years. I don't know if it will ever move in person or not. It's usually in the spring. My agency runs a Relatives as Parents program Facebook page, and there are several other Facebook support groups that are not really affiliated with a specific agency or DHHR, but are just run for certain regions that a lot of people participate in. And then a lot of foster agencies do run their own support groups. Legal aid. Legal aid has some different programs that are helpful, specifically the FAST program for school-age children with special education needs. I know FAST does a lot of work helping people with IEPs and things like that. They have a legal guide that we try to get to all of the families that we're serving. It's really extensive and helpful. Our logo's on there because we helped them print it. We didn't help them make it, but it's nice of them that they put our logo there. It's a really good guide. And then they have this new tool that I think just launched a couple of weeks ago. And this is my one resource that's not for people caring for kids in the system. This is more for relatives who are informally caring for a child, so that they can get assistance on kind of what should they pursue? Should they pursue adoption or guardianship, or what type of formal, legal custody should they pursue for these kids? It looks really interesting and helpful because those are the hardest calls. The people who we spend a lot of time and effort so that we show up really high in Google rankings. So we get all of the phone calls, and these relatives who are caring for kids informally are the ones with the least resources that we are least able to help. So I'm excited about this tool. Healthy Grand Families is a good resource. They have a new director, Melissa Lilly, and she's great. And Healthy Grand Families can vary a lot from county to county what the individual programs are doing. And I think Melissa is working to kind of standardize that. But if you go to that link, you can click on any county and find your coordinator. And even if the website is not up to date on what that county group is doing, I think you could contact the coordinator and get up to date information. They run a training curriculum for grandparents where they can learn about legal issues, social media, just different things, nutrition, I think, different things relating to caring for kids. And then there's some incentives for completing that. But there's also a social worker attached to that program for follow-ups and more individualized help. Sorry, I got to plug my agency over and over here. So we have a carry-on program for families or kids that need luggage and hygiene items. We have amazing people who fundraise for us, and we use those funds to promote normalcy activities. So this morning an agency called, and they have a kid who's in foster care who wants to go to leadership camp, and it was about $400, which I understand a foster family might not have. So we're going to help with that. We bought prom dresses. Sometimes we are able to give out bicycles, just different activities to help kids feel on par with their peers. We have a resource library for books on foster care, adoption, general parenting. We mail those to families and then give them a postage paid envelope to send them back. And then one of my newest projects is I got a small grant from West Virginia American Water, and I'm doing I need a name for them. I'm calling them affirmation boxes right now, but we're doing boxes with specific hygiene and other items for Black youth in foster care. And then June 10th, I'm doing a hair care seminar in Huntington. I haven't even made the flyer yet, but I do have the date. So those are things I'm excited about, kind of my side projects. And this is really not comprehensive, but we help a lot of families find tangible items, and these are places that we refer to a whole lot for everything from house repairs to they need a crib to they need diapers. It's really time intensive, but there's a lot of different resources that not everyone is aware of. And then upcoming, May is Foster Care Month. We have brought Walk With Me back. We had a hiatus and brought it back for its 10th year last year. We're back again, and we have great sponsors so that foster and adoptive families and kinship and relative families can attend for free. So I just wanted everyone to have that flyer. It's in Charleston at Appalachian Power Park, now Gomart Park, I think, but it's always been there. So this will be year 11. So we really hope that families or anyone in the field would like to join us. Oh, and that's it. There's my contact information. I know this was a whole lot. I hope the links are helpful when you get this in your email, but if you want any more information, feel free to follow up with me. I think that's it.
Thank you, Rachel. It's great. So there is one question in the chat, and I'll open it up for other folks who have questions. They were asking if there is grant funding that can bring some specific topics, trainings, and provide childcare.
Probably. I have a grant from the Bureau of Senior Services for relative caregivers. That's got some excess money right now. Yeah. And our Think program also does a lot of trainings, and we have really been trying to work together this summer to do trainings that are relevant for their program and mine, because they really do cross over a lot. So I know that we're taking suggestions for topics, and we're working on one on food insecurity. That was the most recent request.
Great. I'm just scrolling through to see if there are other. Somebody commented, this is more of a comment, I'm learning that Early Head Start is a great resource for pregnant women and families with young children.
That's good to know. Thank you.
And here's another sort of just FYI that WV Medicine in the Eastern Panhandle is recruiting practitioners to train in PCIT.
Yay!
Excuse me. Oh, sorry. Let's see. Okay, most of this is. So does anybody else have questions? So somebody asked about the PowerPoint. So we will be sending out a copy of the PowerPoint to everyone via email after the presentation. Somebody asked, what are the lower and upper age limits for becoming a foster parent?
That's a really good question. So per policy, 18 and up. It used to cap at 65. It no longer caps at 65. The caveat is, that was really changed mostly to benefit relatives, I think. So a 19-year-old sister might be able to foster her younger brother, but I don't know an agency that's going to certify a 19-year-old to be a foster parent. Some agencies really prefer that they be 21 or even a little bit older. And obviously, like if someone is 70, they're not likely to be approved to adopt an infant, but they could potentially do short-term infant care, or they could adopt a teenager. So that 65 cap is no longer there, but it is subjective.
Okay. Somebody said, this is not related to another topic. It says if you do school online full-time, that does not qualify for childcare for foster families. That's interesting.
Yeah, and I probably should have put that in my barrier section. I've also heard of families having issues, maybe where they're self-employed and they're not making enough money where it looks like they're working full time,
Mhm.
especially people who in agriculture. So I've heard there's some efforts to improve that, but that's a barrier.
This is a question that I have just out of curiosity, and I imagine I can kind of guess the answer to this, but have you noticed that the barriers have gotten more intense since the COVID pandemic and over the past few years with everything that's been going on, or how would
Yep.
you, yeah.
Yep, I knew what you were saying before you finished the sentence.
You're
Yeah.
nodding.
Yeah, the amazing thing was we talked to so many relative caregivers that did so good during COVID because, oh my gosh, online school about killed my family and I'm not in my 70s. But foster families, we definitely got less inquiries because people were managing so much. We've talked to, unfortunately, a lot of families who experienced health issues or ongoing economic issues post-COVID. And we've also, this isn't necessarily COVID related, we have a lot of families in our database where we will talk to them and they were interested in foster care, but in the interim, they had to take in a family member's child. So we've kind of lost a lot of potential foster families because they're doing kinship, which I'm glad they're there to do that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, here's another question. Can you let us know of resources for respite for kinship foster care?
I can research it. Let me, yep. Can that person put in their email or?
You can email it to me or Sarah, and then we can just, send it out to participants with the PowerPoint maybe.
Okay. Yep, I
If
will
you
find
want.
out.
Okay, that's a great question. This is a really informative presentation, and it sounds like you guys are doing fabulous work. So that's
We're
wonderful.
busy.
I'm sure it's definitely needed. Just before we wrap up, I just want to remind folks that I put in the chat a link to our evaluation survey. So if you have a minute to complete that before you go today, I will repost it again so it kind of comes up. That would be great. You'll also get a copy of that with your CE certificate, so you can do it at a later point if you wish. Okay. Does anybody have any final questions or comments? There's lots of thank yous and great presentations. I don't know if you can see that in the chat, Rachel, but.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Somebody asked about printable brochures for families.
Yeah, what kind?
What kind? If that person wants to type in or unmute themselves, they can.
Oh, resource brochures. I don't have that. Whew, that would be a great idea.
Yeah.
If that was the intention.
Yeah, that's it. So there was a follow-up. Does Mission have printable option? So yeah.
It sounds like a great project for my communications person to turn this presentation into a printable. So yeah, that's probably pretty doable. Sure.
Yeah, great. Okay. Well, thank you again for joining us, and thank you everybody who joined us on the seminar today. Like I said, we will be emailing out the PowerPoint as well as the CE certificates. It may take us about a week to get all that out, so just be patient. Check your spam folders too. So thank you, and I look forward to seeing everybody who wants to join us here next week for our last seminar for the spring season, and keep your eyes and ears peeled for announcements for our fall seminar series. And thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.